Welcome to Module number 4 in Contemporary Philippine Arts from the Regions, the Elements of Visual Arts. Our learning competency is evaluate contemporary art forms based on the elements and principles. This will be for the second week of the first semester. Expectations. By the end of this lesson, the learner will be able to number 1. Identify and define the elements of visual arts. And number 2. Evaluate Philippine art forms based on their elements. Let's start the module with a pretest to measure what you know before discussing the lesson. Instructions. On your handout, choose the letter of the best answer and write it on the blank provided before the number. Let's have a recap of the previous lesson. A recap of Module 3. These are the art forms and practices from the different regions of Visayas and Mindanao that we discussed in the previous lesson. Let's proceed to the lesson proper, the elements of visual arts. The elements of art. These are the building blocks or ingredients of art, the basic components of artworks. This applies to visual, performing, literary, and media arts. The elements of visual arts. Every visual art utilizes at least one of the 6 elements: lines, shapes, forms, colors, textures, and space. Different elements of art can be used to express certain emotions and meaning. Depending on how it looks, humans have different emotional and psychological responses and perceptions to each. First element of visual arts is line. It is a stroke or mark that can be straight, curved, thick, or thin. For example, let's look at the images on the left. Observe the different messages they convey through the use of lines. The artwork with scribbled and jagged lines conveys emotions of anger and looks chaotic, whereas the other artwork with defined and straight lines conveys tranquility or calmness. Next is shape. It is a space enclosed by lines. The use of shapes can dictate the point of view of the audience, called perspective. Perspective changes depending on the shape's size and angles. For instance, look at the image on the right. A square can indicate that an object is being viewed in front, then changing it to a trapezoid can mean that the object is now below the normal eye level and that there is a change in perspective. Additionally, shapes can also present different emotions and actions, such as circles for continuous movement. The next element is form. This pertains to a 3-dimensional shape or any shape that has length, width, and depth. Forms help create the illusion of 3-dimensional design in a 2-dimensional plane, like in interior design or architectural design. More importantly, form is an integral element in traditional 3D art, such as carving and ceramics. Next is color. This refers to the product when light hits an object then reflected to the eyes. Value is how light, known as tint, and dark, known as shade, a color is. The color of an artwork is most often the first element a viewer evaluates and interprets. The use and value of color creates the mood of an artwork. Look at the photos of the cityscapes on the right. One is colored in dark blue and gives off a depressing and lonely atmosphere, but the other is colored with a combination of yellow, green, and sky blue, which exudes a joyful and pleasant vibe to the viewer. The next is space. This is the area surrounding, between, and within an object. It can either be positive or negative. Positive space is the area occupied by any object, usually the foreground or object itself, whereas the negative space is the area surrounding an object. On the image on the left, the positive space is the flower and the leaves, whereas their background is the negative space. Space can change a lot of things in an artwork. It illustrates the distance between objects, perspective, depth, as well as size. It helps evoke a different message based on the relationship of the foreground and background. The last element of visual art is texture. This pertains to the visual perception of a space of any object. The texture of an artwork can be experienced either through seeing or feeling it. Using the other elements of art, the artist can recreate the surface quality of an object, which greatly contributes to realism or the imitation of life itself. Optical illusions of the actual textures of objects are recreated in paintings and drawings. We're finally done with the lesson, so let's have an activity. On your handout, evaluate the art form given by answering the questions on the next slide. Answer the following questions on your handout. Answer the wrap-up and valuing questions on your handout. Let's wrap up the lesson by listing down 5 key ideas in the module. In valuing, what are the significances of knowing the elements of visual arts? Let's have a post-test to measure what you've learned in this lesson. Instructions. On your handout, choose the letter of the best answer and write it on the blank provided before the number. Pause the video while you answer. Key to correction. Check your own work and remember, be honest. That concludes the Contemporary Philippine Arts from the Regions Module Number 4. Congratulations! I'll see you on the next one.